I was saying, wake up, Danielle. Just kidding. You look so peaceful and quiet.
Do I?
Well, you did. You were writing something or reading something, and
I don't feel peaceful.
no,
I looked at the agenda and I was like, uh-oh.
yeah, the agenda.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, we need a chair for this group. Or we don't need a chair. We just need someone to facilitate the meeting. So if you guys want to take turns rotating every month, I'm fine with that. But I need a facilitator for the meeting, please.
I got nothing, folks. I just got done with a 3-day bike summit with the National League of American Cyclists. I'm like, I'm cooked. So anyone but me. How about that?
Well, I'm sure, depending, I don't have the memo on what it takes to facilitate a meeting, but I guess you start by calling it to order and
Correct.
take roll and
Yeah.
uh, the usual approve the minutes from last month and all
Yep.
of that.
Look at
I'd
your.
like to do it tonight and kind of get used to it in case I'm forced to do it sometime in the future. So
And I'll help you along the way.
thank you very much.
Yes.
So I guess the first order of business is calling the meeting to order. It's 5:33. I think it's time to start.
Okay.
Then secondly, the approval of last month's minutes. I assume everybody's read them. And
Yeah. So can we get a first and a second for those, please?
I'll move.
Thank you.
I'll second.
I'll second.
And then third item would be public comments.
Actually, let's go back to the last one. Everyone, yeah, everyone good with the minutes from last month? Yep. All right, cool. All yes. Now we can move on to public comments.
Are there any public comments?
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Okay, then I think we move on to our scheduled items, starting with updating the mentorship program. Staff is providing this information, so I guess that's you, Danielle.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry. Please don't kill me. I have not had time to get to the applications for our new CAB members. So what I was supposed to do since last meeting was review the new CAB application, new member applications, and then make recommendations based on their background and skills on who I feel would be a good fit for a mentor. We also have 2 new CAB members that I just found out about today. And so once I get their applications in, then I will take all of those together and review them. I have marked off my calendar for next week to do that. So what I'll do is I'll email the group once I come up with those recommendations. So my apologies. I have other things that are super high priority that have to get done. I have deadlines.
While we're on that subject though, can I ask real quick, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, Member Moore, but who are the new members and how many do we need seats do we need to fill and for what districts?
So we have the ones that we've introduced already, Jorge, Manny, Beth, and Tavi, or Shantavi. And then the new ones that I found out about today are Damien Square and Candace Richardson. So Damien, actually I need to go and look. One of them is a Southeast Santa, no, I'm sorry. I need to go back and look. I'm not 100% sure who they are. And then I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Put you on the spot with that, but I had a quick meeting with Eddie Alvarez yesterday, and he had mentioned that he may have somebody, and I don't know if one of those newer people were recommended by Eddie or not.
I'll look into it tomorrow. I'll ask the city clerk's office. I'm not sure if they're from him or Vice Mayor Rogers. So, and we're also waiting to, even though they were announced as cab members, new cab members, there was an issue. One didn't have an application on file, which is easy to take care of, but then the other one needs to, we need to verify his voter registration record. So once we get that, then they'll be official. So we're kind of in a waiting phase right now, but we'll see. Hopefully those two go through and we'll have 2 new members.
Great.
But I'll get that
Sorry,
answer to you tomorrow.
That's fine. It's not
Yeah.
urgent. I was just curious because of me being, potentially recommended by Eddie. At one point he was saying yes, and then I'm not sure if I'm in his district, and so there's a little confusion.
Okay,
Okay,
got it.
so we can talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and
Okay.
then Member Moore, you had a question, comment?
I was just, in addition to assigning mentors, could you also assess a good assignment to subcommittees?
I'm sorry, what was that? Assess.
The subcommittees.
Oh, yes. Yep, I can do that too. Yep. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Then do you want to move on to the outline for strategic plan report?
Yeah. And that will be me also. So actually, Cherie, you had sent out an email and I still haven't had a chance to respond to it, but you did request a Dropbox be developed for the subcommittee. Actually, I did respond to it and I had asked you a question actually. So you had asked that a Dropbox be created for the subcommittee. And I think I had asked about what we wanted to see in the report or what types of documents we were looking for to put in the Dropbox.
Gotcha. And we might be reinventing the wheel because we may have already done this with the strategic plan. Because at one point we had, was it strategic plan or was it cab grants? I'm trying to remember. We've done this before. It was cab grants. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about for this subcommittee because we do have the so we can, because we have new members that are going to who are going to hopefully select expertise. Having kind of a catch-all for what we're about to undertake with the review of the strategic plan. And at the last meeting, Kari had gone over looking at the planning document that we put to the council, and we kind of checked off things that were done and things that were left that we needed to address and decide on prioritizations. And so I was thinking having that document in there for everyone. And then, oh, drawing a blank. Sorry. My first meeting was 7:30 this morning with Congressman Thompson. So I'm like, my brain's a little fried right now because I've had 3 lobbying meetings, 3 webinars, and a wrap-up session. So I'm like, what was I? So now I'm like racking my brain going, what was I working on? What was this about? Oh, and Danielle, while I have you in the meeting, I forgot to mention Mondays with the mayor. You're going to probably hear about this from Leslie in empowerment, but we had Mondays with the mayor and he was talking about the public hearing on the water rates. And I went on the website to find the link to the hearing. And I sat there and fought with it. And so I made the mistake of asking the question of, hey, can we have a webinar for residents on how to navigate the New City website? Because if I'm struggling with it, I can't be the only person when they're trying to find a link to a meeting or Legistar, et cetera, et cetera. And Chris, of course, as the mayor, threw it back to me and said, hey, that's a great thing for COW to be working on because I think you're already working on the academy. And I went, oh. So yeah, and so I texted Leslie was on the call, and I texted her and said, "Well, I'll learn my lesson. They start asking these hard questions."
Yeah, and I don't think that that's an appropriate place for it. I think that falls under our communications team, which does the bulk of the updating and was also the bulk of creating the website. So I can talk to Magali about that and loop in Adrian.
It occurred to
Well,
me. It occurred to me after the fact. It's highly likely we already have a webinar about how to navigate the new city website.
no,
Do one for this. Eric didn't do one.
no.
Oh crud! Because I was thinking, I'm all knowing Eric. He's probably already done the training, and it's just out there that it just needs to be redistributed. But you're like, no, okay,
No.
drat.
Carly.
I was going to also volunteer that is a misguided assignment for the cab to do. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't.
And yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was a little in jest, which is fun, but yeah.
Yeah, we council members and some of our leadership, they have suggestions. I think that either a webinar or a how-to video would be great on how to navigate the website. However, we have to think about staffing resources and the fact that I can't do something like that.
Right.
It just cannot take something else on. And I know that our communications team is really overwhelmed too, but we'll have to get that sorted out internally. So don't worry, cab. I'm definitely, because when he says cab does it, that falls on me to do that.
Right, exactly. And I texted Leslie and apologized in advance. I'm like, oh man, Danielle's gonna slap me with a virtual wet noodle. And then Leslie updated me that the empowerment subcommittee, that the videos you're talking about are like 30 or 1 minute, like really just like information to residents, but they're very like how to email a member council. It's not anything webinar-ish. It's very just, and then I went, oh, oops.
Yeah. So, sorry, back to the Dropbox. Thank you for letting me know about that. Back to the Dropbox. I'll put in the updated document that we worked on last meeting for the strategic plan. But as far as an outline goes, I kind of wanted to just sketch some stuff out because that's how I operate. I don't know if anybody else operates that way, but if you're going to write a report, you start with an outline. And it might be a good way for us to just figure out like what does this group want to see in here. So hold on, I'm going to share my screen and get this started. And while y'all brainstorm, I will write it down. So this is the strategic plan report. We'll just call it that for now. We can come up with something better, but so what is it that we want to cover in this report? And maybe I'll start with Carly, since this was your brainchild. Well, what types of things should we be covering?
Accomplishments. And what maybe if we happen to have recorded it or remembered like when we accomplished it, maybe any barriers or challenges that we experienced, and workarounds, or what we did to address those.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps in addition to accomplishments, items that due to external factors became irrelevant. you know, like the wing finder. I'm not saying that's irrelevant, but we're not doing that anymore.
Right.
And kind of looking at, should we, or yes, we're sunsetting it and we're done with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then maybe a summary of what remains in our work plan, and in that summary, a review of potentially shifting the priorities, you know, and and to go back on the accomplishments, the operations subcommittee completed all their objectives. And so I think definitely acknowledging that we now only have 2 subcommittees is important.
Okay.
Perhaps if we have identified any items in the work plan that might need more support, and that could be fiscal, staff, community board member energy, resources from other departments, like that might be what remains. And would it perhaps exceed the timeline that it had been given, and would we want to continue that in the next plan if it remains relevant?
Okay.
And I probably could come up with more, but to share the brainstorm, I will share the platform with Member Foster and Barnett.
Cool. Thank you.
So Danielle, something that might tie it into our sessions that's so fascinating, because I just realized how many people are still on the cab that were in the strategic planning sessions with Civic Makers. I think it's myself, Cecile, and Vince.
I know.
I think that's something that I'm hearkening back to and going, is it just the 3 of us now?
I think so.
Yeah, yeah. So the rosebud and thorn exercise might be a way to tie in sunsetting some of the accomplishments.
Oh yeah. Thorn. Okay. Okay.
Did we get the and I feel like, Danielle, I asked you about this and I just am not remembering. Did we get the final report from the Sonoma State interns on sort of that organizational development activity we engaged with them on?
Yeah, you had asked that, and no, we didn't, because we never completed that work with them. And so basically what happened with all of the work that they did was, you know, we got the those big road maps that we created, but their professor actually told them that they didn't have to continue on with the rest of it, since there were other in-person workshops that needed to be held to complete that. So they didn't provide us with anything. So that's when
we should acknowledge that somehow.
Yes. So I'm going to put this here. COVID-19, and then SSU. And that was to update plan after 2019. Okay. Oops. Actually, so I'm going to add this to it. So, I mean, this is kind of given, but mission and vision strategic categories. No, this seems like such a long time ago now. Strategic goals and
So Danielle, I'm noticing I just jumped in. I was trying to find what I'd asked about with the Dropbox, and it occurs to me CIG falls under us.
yes.
So I think in terms of the strategic plan outline, that has to be thrown in there somewhere.
Why don't I create another folder?
Okay.
Yeah, I'll create it within, is it titled Expertise Subcommittee, or is it just Community Improvement Grant?
So what I'm noticing from the previous minutes, and this might be the December one, but the fact that CIG falls under this subcommittee because we, Veronica and Carly drafted the grant guidelines, and so what I'm thinking is that for the subcommittee subfolder, CIG would fall under it, and then in this plan report outline, the CIG updates should be included since it is part of the accomplishments. And then there should be a asterisk or something that, you know, lets them know that because of the pandemic, the direction that we've taken the grants with the Office of Community Engagement, that, you know, that needs to be notated. And then in the CIG folder, we can put the new guidelines for CIG for 2021.
Okay. Sounds good.
Danielle, I think another header should be recommendations. I think the CAB should have space to make recommendations.
Absolutely.
For continued work, or and what I'm actually more thinking about is, and I know we're sort of already addressing it, but sort of a process and mechanism for integrating current concerns into our work plan, even though it wasn't identified in the strategic plan.
Yep.
So kind of that concept of annual goals, but I think that annual time frame is still even too long to, you know, if someone brought something up in February and we're like, okay, we'll consider that the following year.
Right.
And yeah, so I think we need, and then another just question I have in terms of the strategic plan that, and I admit, you know, I wasn't at the genesis of it all, but when I first read the strategic plan, what was missing was the integration of the charter requirements and some of the other legislative requirements that the CAB do. And so I think our strategic plan should include those in the future so that it feels more cohesive rather than three separate strands of direction and structure. And I know, I think partly why that happened is, my guess is that the strategic plan was addressing the building of the structure of the CAB. It was implementing, you know, like how we run our meetings and the subcommittees. And so I think that was very important to kind of address those internal structural building blocks, if you will. And then, you know, the Neighbor Fest and all the other stuff sort of was on top of it, but it was confusing. And I feel like we should always integrate those things into the strategic plan, not necessarily a deep dive on them as topics and identifying those specific goals, but at least to put them in our measure of what we accomplish and what we have to do.
Okay. All right. This is going to be a very robust report.
Well, as it should.
Yeah.
And you know me, I'm happy to review and input. And I'm thinking of another thing that I remembered in those notes that I took, where I was trying to learn all the pieces. There was, I'm thinking of evaluation, Danielle.
Oh, okay.
I think there might be something in, and I don't recall if it was a charter or one of the resolutions, but aren't we supposed to evaluate ourselves and somehow? I don't remember if it was a prescribed thing we needed to do. And if I have those other notes in front of me, I could point at it.
Yeah.
Or perhaps I'm just thinking we should evaluate ourselves somehow.
Let's put that right here, because yes, in the actual strategic plan towards the back, there are evaluation metrics.
Yeah.
And shoot, there was something else having to do with evaluation in there. And I don't think that we have really done a great job of capturing that and really doing a thorough evaluation. I think we kind of just do it here and there. And I even have to go back and look at those metrics to see what we said we were going to do. So I think that could be included in what remains in our work. We need to set up an evaluation process, and both subcommittees need to do the work of that evaluation, right? It's not just on this subcommittee, but there's evaluation that has to be done for all the outward facing stuff. Because I know some of those metrics are how many people are we reaching through like NeighborFest, through going to monthly meetings, neighborhood meetings, etc.
And I think the other part with the metrics and evaluations also had to do with the larger goal of applying for grants, and that we would need that data to report back if we were going to go for larger funding sources outside of what the city's allotting. And I think that was the other part of it, is that NeighborFest, to prove its success outside the pilot program, when we rolled it out as a grant program, we were looking at it as a potential launching point for applying for some larger scale regional or federal grants. And all of those require, they all require a certain level of post-event evaluation. So pre-event assessment, post-event evaluation, and whether or not we demonstrated measured improvement in neighborhood preparedness. I think that was specifically about NeighborFest, if we wanted to look at outside funding sources to grow the program outside the pilot program. And then I think you and Kalu and I had a meeting or two about how that might tie in and what we might make that look like. But I think that's one of the connectors that happened.
Yep. Okay.
Guess what I found? My binder.
Oh, your binder. It's like, what did you find?
I know we needed to go into the digital age with binders, but since I had paper, it does work.
Binder.
Binder. Yep. Kevin has a binder.
Binder's behind me. I'm a binder guy. I'm old school.
To piggyback on what Sheree was saying, you know, kind of citing some specific examples, I almost, you know, this would go under a recommendation, in that I almost think we should consider developing a subcommittee that could be operations, that is where evaluation is housed. Because it's typically known that evaluation, unless you have people that are really dedicated to it, it always is sort of like, oh my gosh, we forgot to blah, blah, blah. And I think if we need to assign a responsibility of it, so that when we are doing NeighborFest or any other of the activities that we identify, that evaluation piece just swims right along with it, and we design the activity to capture the data that we need to get the evaluation done, so it's not hard, that we just build it right in there so we'll naturally get it. and maybe assign a cab at NeighborFest to be responsible for some survey work or whatever method we're going to use to complete it. But I think we should dedicate some people to this specifically.
I think that's a great idea. And I'm almost thinking it doesn't necessarily have to be a subcommittee, but maybe as initially an ad hoc, which we have those members who are interested in working on this, and that ad hoc develops the tools or the evaluation plans for the various activities that we have and the tools needed.
Right.
Because while there might be some issues of concern that change over time, we're not developing new programs. So I don't think the evaluation of like NeighborFest, for example, the Civic Engagement Academy as another example, I don't think those are going to change that much over, at least over the next like 3 to 5 years. And so maybe we have an ad hoc that develops the plans for those and the tools to get us started. And I'm saying ad hoc because if we form another subcommittee, that subcommittee is under the Brown Act, and we'd have to follow do all the posting and everything. And that would be three cab subcommittees plus the cab. I won't even get into the council.
No, I think you're right on the ad hoc, because as long as we entertain it as a checkbox, like,
sure,
do we need an ad hoc for this? And yes, let's do it. If no, we don't bother.
Well,
I just think we need to build the thinking to capture this information.
Mm-hmm. Oops.
I think the other part too, with it being an ad hoc, is I think there's crossover with evaluation. I feel like empowerment has a need for it. We have a need for it. And specifically, I'm also thinking about Cecile because she's an expert in that, where if it's, and then also if we do with an ad hoc, I can't remember the timeline, we have to schedule a limitation to it that it's specific to, it's a set amount of time. Was the other thing I remember is that it's time limited. And I don't know if it's 3 months, 6 months.
I will have to double check on that.
Okay.
It's definitely not 3. I think it's 6, but it could also be a year.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll get back to you. Okay.
Under recommendations, can I jump in there, or
yeah,
we still up in summary of what remains in work?
No.
Process and mechanism for addressing current concerns. Again, without creating another committee, where would, I was going to kind of wait until we got into future agenda items, but, a new major concern is, and I mentioned it to Danielle, and I met with a few people out at Bennett Valley Golf Course. I met with Eddie Alvarez yesterday, and the golf course and that plan going forward, whether they paid the consulting fee of $150,000 to CBRE. I think now they're going to look at doing an RFP and then getting some other potential participants in that. So I can get into more detail later, but that process and mechanism for addressing current concerns is a pretty major one. I mean, the Say Bennett Valley Golf Course is almost at 4,000 members.
Yeah.
And it's not a district issue. It's really a citywide issue, that open space and the golf course and the recreation and the, whatever. It's a big thing. And I was a bit surprised that Jason Nutt, he hasn't been scheduled. I'd like to see him be scheduled for one of our meetings, and we might want to form some form of a subcommittee or within one of our subcommittees, have some people that would represent the CAB board in making our comments and recommendations to the city council and addressing the public's concerns and issues and whatever, because it's getting pretty heated. They're not sticking to the points. A lot of these people that are becoming involved are, slinging a lot of mud and arrows. And I thought Jason did a great job presenting to our board in our last board meeting. But I've been reading some comments from people that, I was frankly surprised and shocked that, they felt he was coming off the way that, they were expressing it. And I wasn't in on that Zoom meeting. So anyway, I'll stop there. And my question is basically, how do we deal with that as a board?
Yeah. So actually, this is new. The mayor announced that he is creating an ad hoc specifically for the Bennett Valley Golf Course, to look at the RFP, to look at everything, right? And also to create space for community input and community dialogue with those residents who are voicing a lot of concern. And so I don't have any details on that other than he just announced that, I believe, yesterday. So
yeah, and I heard that in my meeting yesterday that
okay.
wasn't on the council's agenda yesterday, the Bennett Valley Golf Course issue, but it would seem to me that you've got the council and they're dealing with it, and they're going to have their ad hoc, their committee. You've got the citizens from Bennett Valley, and really they need to form their own committee to represent, their thinking and their point of view, so that it's, condensed into a few people. And then I'm just thinking that we're kind of in between and might want to, and I'm certainly happy to, I'm already involved. So I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah. Sheree?
There's one other thing with this that I don't know, and it could be which board this falls under. And my question is in regards to the Board of Community Services, and whether or not, because this is a park, this is a golf course, this is a park, this is a city enterprise facility. And I believe that falls squarely under the Board of Community Services. So it is a issue of the community. And as somebody who represents Northeast Santa Rosa, I can definitely say that, absolutely that it's a community issue, but I don't want to misdirect the residents by, what I'm saying is that we've got this ad hoc forming, but it's entirely possible Board of Community Services may have already agendized this for a discussion item, or, I'm saying, like, there could be some stuff going on behind the scenes that should be identified. But also Kevin's right of, like, procedure wise, of that when an issue emerges abruptly, or when the city makes a determination, this is that big question about CAB is supposed to be this nexus of getting information out to the residents and then taking issues from the residents to the council. And this is an example of the council having a report come forward and recommendations, and all of a sudden it causing a huge response from the community because there's all these questions of, what are you doing?
Right. It came up initially in an article in the Press Democrat. That's the first I heard of it.
Right.
And I mean, people get upset when that happens, obviously, and there, it's Parks and Rec is part of it, because you've got the golf course, you've got the Galvin Park, you've got tennis, you've got soccer, you've got softball. There are a lot of different groups, and I need to talk to somebody at Parks and Rec and get clear on how they book that, because it's part of it is it's not all political, it's an economic issue, but there's so many different areas that this touches, and it's a real important, I think, issue going forward for the city of Santa Rosa. They can't make a bad decision on this one, because we'll all be paying for it, and not monetarily, but in other ways in the future in our kids and grandkids. I mean, my father played there. I mean, I learned to play golf there, and it's a lot of people are vested in that area, that golf course, and they care about its future. So
Well, and it's the conversation about zoning. That's the other piece of this, is that we, as a resident, do people have a clear understanding of when the city has these study sessions, or when they bring forward items or agenda items, or when staff make recommendations and they have zoning implications? Are the residents, do they feel empowered that they have, do they have a clear sense of knowledge of what that process is, what they're talking about? Because entirely with that golf course, there's a lot of questions because people feel like this is all of a sudden. And the impression I got from the city was that it was an initial discussion. But the unfortunate side was that there was an opportunity for community engagement and feedback, right? There was an opportunity that they could have gone out to the residents first and said, here are the challenges, here's some things that we're looking at. But instead, it feels like the residents feel like it was an internal discussion that then went to council. And it's like, well, okay, that's a communication challenge for sure. But I think that that's a larger issue that we may be part of, as far as like that, since we work with CIP, that could be the larger discussion. And because the general plan is now being, formulated, and that we have the CAC, this is that opportunity for that larger discussion of when we are talking about RFPs and when we are talking about anything that has to do with zoning. That is the process that we have in place. Is it the best option for residents? Because you're right, Kevin's 100%. People reacted because they felt like they found out about it for the first time, either by reading the paper or going on Nextdoor and finding out that this was being discussed, and no one had heard anything about it prior. And with zoning issues, that is just one of those ones that it hits at people on a very emotional level. And on the same side of things, we just had this discussion with council for the Roseland Library, and we're seeing incredible response from Roseland in a positive direction. But it's also the sense of, realizing that something comes from council in a decision, and then nobody can necessarily see the outcome initially of that, the incredible response people are giving that this is happening. And, so it kind of on both sides of it, right?
Mm-hmm. So getting back to this report under recommendation. So I think, the question, going back to what Kevin was saying, is what is that process? What is that mechanism? How do we develop that? And we can talk about that more at another meeting, but I think that that's something we take to the whole board of what does this look like? How are we going to address these current concerns? Because there is that standing agenda item where we take in concerns from residents on city issues. Okay, and then what? And so we'll have to figure out with the board as a whole how to address that, and then what.
Well, and I think it's important that, whether Jason addresses, we put him on the agenda. I mean, we need, I've read a lot of information. I've in the last week, I've had conversation with numerous people and gotten various perspectives. There's a lot of misinformation, as you're aware.
Yeah.
It would be nice to get a clear and concise kind of a report from the city, because they, like you said, I mean, they aren't saying, or didn't say, we're going to sell the golf course, we're going to develop houses, we're going to move the homeless. But people have their own, kind of perception and reality of what's going on. And we can't address anybody's questions unless we have the proper information. And I think that's important, that we get something from the city that says, here's where we are, this is the plan. And it's, it's not like a big mystery, but it has to be documented, and it has to be presented, I think, to us, so that we're in a position to give the information, not fake news, real news, right? So that's all. I think that's important.
I'd also like to add on the process of responding. to these hot button community issues, when the CAB is formulating a response, are we doing so as a unit? Or are we just generating some conversation within our membership where we may agree to disagree on things or take an action? Like, we don't really have a lot of, we don't have any rules that we have to agree on this. So I think in developing this process, it's like, should we consider, you know, a motion and a vote to say we as a CAB agree that we want to make this recommendation or say something, or maybe we're saying, hey, let's talk about this, get the information. And it would just be nice, I guess, like, even if we do sort of independent things within our own neighborhoods and communities or political actions, to share our intent or curiosities or whatever we want to call it, just so that kind of that we're on the same page, whether, do you know what I mean? Like, just to share more about what, like, I didn't know, Member Foster, you were doing all this, and I don't need to know, but I think if we shared what we were doing on these types of things, we would feel more collegial or more unified.
I agree. And this really
I'm
all
kind of fishing here.
It started about last Friday or Thursday. I don't know, I called Danielle. The thing is, I think we're all going to have our own personal opinions and our own personal positions, whether it's, you know, like I said, I hit my first golf ball on that golf course. So, you know, emotionally, and my kids learned to play golf there. So I look at it one way from, you know, an emotional position. That doesn't mean that it's going to totally influence, you know, what I think should be done with the golf course. But, you know, there's political, economic, it's like anything else. I mean, everybody has their own position and opinion. I'm not suggesting that the board take a position. All I'm saying is that we should know and be informed what the facts are so that we can report the facts to our constituents. And then we're all going to have our own personal, you know, feeling and opinion about it. And like you said, I don't know, you know, what the limitations of how we can express our feelings or our opinions to our constituents, but, you know, we're all going to have it. It's natural. Not everybody's going to have the same, you know, kind of emotional reaction to it, the, you know, same feeling of what the outcome of, you know, a study, what should ultimately be done there, et cetera, et cetera. But I think in order to do our job, we need to have the facts, and we have none. We have no information except for what we're reading in the Press Democrat, a conversation here, a website there, and, you know, banners and placards and the Facebook page. But I think it would be in all of our best interest to kind of read what people are saying and kind of get the different, you know, kind of emotional feelings that people have, and then get the position from, you know, the city. What are they doing? And then, you know, it's being misrepresented. I can tell you clearly that the city and Jason Nutt is, you know, they're slamming. I mean, people get emotional and they say things. It's not constructive. You know, we're trying to figure this out collectively as a, you know, the citizens, as boards, as councilmen, and I think we need clarity is all.
Okay. Anything else in regards to the report?
I think that it may be obvious, but I think that once it's drafted, the CAB should approve it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I think it would be, cool if we solicited volunteers to be present at the council meeting that it was reviewed, so that we not a requirement, but just sort of a prompt to take a poll on. And I know I'm assuming the chair would be, of course, leading this, but I think it's an opportunity for engaging in that way. And I've been sort of perusing some of the council policy documents, and it looks like quarterly the council receives information about membership on the boards and commissions. And so that could just be, you know, out of so many CAB members, we have 2. And I mean, it just might be a quick one-off if it's happening.
Yeah, that's actually in regards to attendance. So we do, when I take attendance, I fill out this sheet and then I turn it in every quarter to our city clerk's office. And then they give it, if there's anything that's of concern, like a CAB member has missed all 3 meetings in that quarter, then they let their appointing council member know.
And I'm just, you know, I think about our name, the Community Advisory Board, and just wonder what we're advising on.
Issues of concerns of city residents. And
we do that, but we do that individually as CAB members.
Correct.
Okay.
But you're talking about as a board.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say we need to kind of like to go back to the example we just sort of dissected around the golf course.
Right.
But I'm just trying to match the name, which is fine. It may not have a connection to our function. And I'm wondering if through the strategic plan, in identifying what our work is, that somehow we're able to, in our recommendations, be advising the council on maybe some of the current issues that we took up or our structural things. Like, for example, I know at the goal setting, the council discussed matching the CAB boundaries to their districts, which I think is a good idea, but you know, it'd be nice to be included in that as well. And I don't know, I'm just trying to look for more interface with the council in what the title of our board says we do.
Right.
I mean, Cherie was good about reporting out the monthly luncheon or meeting with the mayor, whatever you guys were doing, but
yeah, and maybe
I'm wondering if we could report up to them too more. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm saying. I'm really brainstorming here. This is loose.
Yeah, and maybe this is something that we continue to talk about and develop as we make our way to the charter review, which is happening next year, right? Because we're definitely going to push for a revision of what it's outlined for CAB to focus on in the charter review. Because there's some things that just aren't relevant anymore. But maybe it's like, I feel like CAB should have a bigger role in goal setting and priorities for the council for the next year, or for the city for the next year. But that definitely
be a piece, like a bigger role could just be formalizing something. You know, that as a result of accomplishing or not the objectives in our strategic plan, we, the CAB, even if it's sort of just a dry, not a political thing, but just from the strategic plan, we accomplished this, still have to do this, therefore we recommend these things continue or new things happen or whatever it is, but just to have a formalization of input. I have to go into the other room for just a moment,
Okay.
but I'm not leaving the meeting.
Okay. Sherry.
For the report, so I don't know. So part of me is like going back to my operations brain, and do we want to include like under the accomplishments, things that were achieved? So we had the new cab member orientation and all those documents that Carly created. And then at one point, operations, one of the goal priorities that was achieved was member bios on the website. And I don't know if that's something we want to carry over. And I don't know if that's something that has been prioritized with this latest round of new appointees. And it's also a fallback question to you, because every time it involves the CAB website, it involves you.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I mean, I think it's relevant for the report, but I don't know going forward, like that was a priority and a goal for operations, right? Because CAB wanted to have more visibility, more accessibility on the city website. And then get to know your CAB member. I think we've kind of talked about modifying that when people become on the board, giving them advance notice to kind of give their background. But since we haven't formalized that yet, I think it's something that should be noted in the report. And then the only other thing for operations was hosting more collaborative meetings, having the CAB host more collaborative meetings. And again, it was kind of, so Lucinda and I went out and researched what collaborative meeting models look like. And we had put that idea out of putting out a different model and trying it out at times. And then we ended up making some changes on how CAB facilitated. And then ultimately we ended up with 2 vice chairs, and then the vice chairs co-chair the meeting. And so, and then we drove so much of the agenda towards the strategic plan, the chairs of the subcommittees took over pretty much the other 2/3 of the meeting. And so it became more collaborative just because of how we focus the meeting facilitation.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just, in terms of things to document the reporting, I'm like, this was stuff that came out of operations before it merged into expertise. And so if we're talking about things that were finalized and why the merger happened, I feel like these are things that, as far as like how we got to here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, and one last thing I have a question on with emerging issues. Roseland annexation, since you were instrumental with all of that. And I want to say, was that January of 2018?
Yes.
Oh man. Okay. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that because Kevin had brought up about emerging issues, and I have a question about what does CAB do procedurally after we take a role or do some significant, whether it's a community event or it's something that we're vested in. And so I know from experience of working with you that Roseland annexation was a huge priority of the Office of Community Engagement. And my question is that what happened, right? Because we had that huge event in Roseland, and there was all of these toolkits that were handed out, and there was all these resources, and we had all the city departments, and you had all the elected officials there, and there's a whole big shibbity-doo. And then the question I have is then what, right? And so that was my question for you, is that as a strategic planning so we talk about emerging issues, but I'm also like, what about things that the city invests and prioritizes? And where is it then documented? Is there a follow-up? Things like that. Because one of my questions has been, since the annexation, has Roseland, like, do we have we've had an election cycle, but do we have new neighborhood organizations? We had some work that came out of NeighborFest in Roseland. I know North Bay Organizing Project has just announced their issues assembly is coming up on Saturday. And so I'm wondering, are there representatives in Roseland? Are they going to be at that assembly? Have we found out, are there new neighborhood and/or, community leaders that have emerged with the annexation? And, who are they? What are they working on? What are their top tier priorities? What do they want to see? And are those emerging neighborhood leaders part of the general plan? Are they part of the downtown area station plan? These are questions I have just in terms of,
Yeah.
we're a conduit. And this to me seems like one of those core value key issues for the city, right? That they want to see success and they want to see measurements of success. And so that's why I'm like, what do we do with that?
Okay. Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're at 6:30, just doing a time check. This is very robust, which is fantastic because it gives me a good starting place. My recommendation is, even though it seems like I'm really, 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 really busy, I actually have just closed out a couple of things, which is a very good thing. So now I can take a stab at drafting this and then sending it to you guys at some point to review. I would really like to get this done and presented to council. Hopefully sometime this summer. And the reason why I say that is Carly already knows this, and so does Madeline, so it's not a huge surprise, but I'm applying to law school. And if I get accepted, I have to take some prerequisite courses this summer, and then I would start in the fall. So I'd like to get this off of my plate before that happens, is what I'm trying to say. So my plan is to get this developed. I have open time next week, so I'm going to block that off of my calendar and get you guys a draft of this. I'll say within the next 2 weeks.
What's the timeline for city agendizing? It's usually 8 weeks.
It's been pushed back because of the open government ordinance. So it went from 21 days to, I believe, I don't think it's a full 8 weeks, but it's somewhere around that.
Yeah. So if you want to get something on council for the summer, let's say June.
That's my goal. I would have to have everything ready,
including the supporting documents too,
by next month.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Putting the deadline on my notes.
It's you need an 8-week advance commitment to put something or request something on the council's agenda. 8 weeks, 2 months.
The reason why that is because so the new open government ordinance requires that the council's preliminary agenda gets posted 12 business days prior to the meeting with all agenda materials. So that's including like presentations, reports, staff report, etc. And then the final agenda gets posted 5 business days prior to the council meeting. Now, what that looks like internally, and we're actually doing a study session on this on March 23rd. So definitely tune into that. What that does to our internal process is it moves it back. Oh, hold on. I'm going to get some correct information
now
here.
You guys are going to be like the county.
Oh no, the county is mirroring what we're doing.
Oh my God.
We drafted it first. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to present, this is not as bad as I thought. However, there's some other internal stuff that has to happen. So if I'm going to report on June 29th, then I have to have everything finalized and uploaded into our system by June 1st. However, I have to get this to our admin team by May 25th. That prior to that, I have to have my manager approve everything and finalized everything by May 18th. Prior to that, legal has to review it and approve everything by May 10th. So that's just what we're working with. So it's maybe not quite 8 weeks, but it's close to it. In addition to that, we have to have everything, agendas. We don't have to have the supporting documents, but everything having to do with the agenda has to be translated into Spanish. And if there is a request for another language, we also have to make sure that that gets translated as well before the final posting. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
So,
But it's for very good reasons. That's the main thing about it is that it's to give the public an early opportunity, and if they want to participate, they want to comment. There's very good reasons behind it. But we're also a city of 190,000 people, and I don't know how many city departments we have, and council has to be able to manage it. They have to be able to manage all of the issues coming to the city from all the different departments. And that's the other part, is that just because you have everything together doesn't necessarily mean it's going to land on the agenda you want. It's just, that's how they manage. That's how they are able to manage the size and scale of everything that's coming to council.
Yeah.
And also they prioritize.
So definitely recommend watching the study session on March 23rd, because it's a kind of an evaluation. And actually, we're doing kind of a preview of that at the Open Government Subcommittee meeting next Wednesday on the 10th. That won't be as in-depth or detailed, but it's kind of the overview of what to expect at the study session. But the study session will cover in-depth just all of the implementation feedback that staff has for council. The county looks like they went 8 business days prior, final agenda posting prior to the county Board of Supervisor meetings. So now there's a request from some community members to mirror what the county is doing and make that align. And I don't think that that's feasible, although council's going to have to figure that out. So I am not the one to make that decision. So are we good? We're good on the report, correct? I will get you a draft in about 2 weeks. Fingers crossed.
Wow. Well,
Fingers
good
crossed.
job. That was a lot there.
Yeah.
Are we moving on to future agenda items then?
Yes, we are.
So the grant program evaluation criteria. Who has some information about that?
I do.
Oh, back at you.
Yeah. So I actually wanted to get the report outline off of our plate first, and then I will be bringing, let's see, we're in March now. The application will actually be released April 1st, but we'll have time to develop or update the evaluation criteria. So what I can do in the meantime is send you the draft application packet so you can take a look at what we say the evaluation criteria is. And I'll send you what we used for the what evaluation tool we used for the applications last time, to get you to start thinking about that. And then we'll cover it at our April meeting.
All good with that, everybody? And then next item is how CAB advises the city council. And
there you go.
I kind of jumped ahead with the golf course issue, but I would imagine that is an item that along with many others that we need to come up with some sort of a format for that, or process.
Okay. Everyone good with that item? Cool. Making a note here. I'm going to send you the grant application and evaluation tool. Okay.
And then the final item then is the CAB's role in council goal setting. And I have no comment personally on that. They seem to do their own thing. And Danielle, or does somebody have some ideas?
Well, since this is for future agenda items, it's an item there that we'll put on an upcoming agenda. So I think once we get past the report and the grant evaluation, then we can decide on the how CAB advises city council and their involvement in goal setting, if that sounds good to everybody.
in that agenda item, then do we have some sort of history of how it's been done in the past, or?
That's what I'll bring to that meeting when we're ready to discuss it.
Okay.
Yeah, that way you have all of the information so that you can have a discussion.
I'm not presenting. It's going to be the chair and co-chair, so I'm off the hook.
No, I'll provide the background information. But I'm thinking probably like our May or June meeting that we get to those things. And
Well, with the goal sessions in council, I mean, it happens right after the election. It's in January or February. And the interesting part about it is that it's a public meeting and people can provide public comment during the goal sessions. It's a little weird in Zoom. But I've always had this, there's always been this question to me, and part of it could be that NBOP is doing this, is that NBOP is hosting an issues assembly. And there's a question in the back of my head of like, could that be the starting point where we put it out, a residence-wide issues assembly that leads, in other words, having the residents take the lead on the goals session of giving people an opportunity to prioritize goals that they would like to see for the city, start there, take that feedback, consolidate it into, these are the top 5 emerging issues that came from the feedback we got from the residents from this, and I'm saying it not as an event, but as a process. In other words, putting it out at that starting point where the residents have like 6 to 8 weeks to provide feedback. Then they go into the goal setting session with that preliminary data of this is what came from the residents. These are the priorities that came from the residents, and here's information, and then that gives the city staff the opportunity to take a look at them and say, here's some feasibility around it and these issues, and then council goes into goal setting and prioritization.
Yeah. So because this is for future agenda items, we can't have any further discussion on this. However, I like that, and I have some additional ideas of things that I learned in my my advanced engagement. I can't even remember the name of it now. Advanced Public Engagement for Local Government Certificate Program. So I actually heard a couple of examples of how other communities do this, and I think that they are something that we should look into doing. So we can talk about that and brainstorm other ideas when we get to that issue at an upcoming meeting. Yes,
Member Moore, you have a question.
I do, and I don't want to prolong this, but I do want to just say that I did attend the goal setting, and for a city of 100, as Cherie said, 90,000 people, the council had scheduled the goal setting time for 5 hours, which doesn't seem like enough time. That said, it went from 5 o'clock to 6:45. And so an hour and 45 minutes of public comment was heard and voicemails played. We didn't hear emails sent, but I was astonished that out of almost 200,000 people in a city, the goal setting session took less than 2 hours. And I just want to say that it saddened me because to me, it reflected a lack of community engagement with our city council.
Yeah.
And half of the comments were about the golf course, which was that hot button, kind of frantic response.
Yeah.
That, so anything the CAB can do to help facilitate a more involved, equitable, because there was only one night offered, that to me is an issue, but anything we can do to help get more voices heard, I think is great. And I look forward to your some best practices that you learned in that course, Danielle.
Yeah. Yes.
I have a quick question about that. I mean, obviously with COVID, people can't in person attend council meetings, number one. So, maybe more people would be involved if they could be seen and heard. Secondly, until I got involved in CAB, I didn't know CAB existed. I didn't, is there a forum that, what is it, the Press Democrat? I mean, not everybody, I mean, now it's like $2, I think, if you buy a paper at, on the street. People don't subscribe to that. The Press Democrat isn't what it used to be. Print media isn't what it used to be. What is the medium that really reaches our local citizens? Radio stations? Is it PSAs? Do we need to get, I have contacts at radio stations. Do we need to, or are you already doing that? They have free time. They have spots that they can't sell.
Yeah.
How do we get the word out to engage people in what's going on in the city? That's just a question. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I do know what the city's doing
I'd
now.
love to hear.
Yeah, but since we can't discuss right now on this agenda item, I'll bring all of that. I'll bring how the city, what has historically been done in the past as far as those goal setting days, because this year was a bad example, but also how we do outreach for those, and then ideas that I learned about from other communities, and then some tools that we have that I think will also help, because just like the what do you call it, the CIP feedback, the public input that the CAB is supposed to be doing through the city charter, CAB used to do town halls only, and that was it, right? But we've moved to doing different activities, so it's a multi-pronged approach rather than just doing one thing. And so we can get creative. So I'll make sure to bring that. I'll do a quick presentation to give you all of that information before we get into brainstorming. But
And I have one last question relating to who or how do we choose our quote sister cities to use as examples of what they do? How is that done?
that's
is it by population, by geography, by demographics?
Yeah.
I know when Jason was talking about, well, this is how they're doing it. This is how they're doing it up in Oregon. And that doesn't necessarily match up with our demographics, a lot of, social economic, so I'm just curious if that, just love to know.
Yeah, we actually have what are called comparable cities. I don't know much about sister cities. I think that's
I just use that as a.
Oh, okay. That's an actual thing though. But we do have comparable cities as far as both population size and infrastructure. So less urban, a little bit more, or a mix of both urban and suburban. So we use those cities to compare, but then we will find best practices from other communities that have worked very successfully, and we'll bring that into the conversation too. It might not work for here, but at least there are ideas that we can brainstorm and figure out if they will work or not. But I think I have a list of those comparable cities that I can send you so you can just see like what we look at. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what they are, but
I was just wondering about the criteria for choosing them, because you have social, economic, you have so many different issues to make it really dovetail with what who we are and what we are. So
actually, I'll ask my colleague who was really heavily involved in that not even a couple years ago now, probably about 6 or 7 years ago when we first developed comparable cities. So I can ask her what the criteria was and how they came to that. I think that'll be helpful for the group too.
I'd be interested in getting that information as well, Danielle.
Okay, happy to do that. Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, I think we've covered everything, unless there's any other items, or do we ask for public comments if there's anybody out there that would like to pipe in?
Sure.
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Cool.
Okay, well, in that case, I move to adjourn this meeting.
I second.
All right.
All right, bye, everybody.
Good
Bye.
night.
Thank
For
you.
putting up with me as your whatever. What was my title this evening?
Facilitator. You did a good job.
Facilitator. I've never been called that before, so that's kind of a new title for me.
There you go. Now you can add it to your resume.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody.